For decades, historians and archaeologists agreed on exactly how human civilization began. It was a neat, logical progression driven by physical necessity. The standard story is simple. Planting seeds yielded a massive surplus of food, giving nomads a reason to build permanent houses. Only after granaries were full did people have time to invent complex culture, monumental architecture, and organized religion. The assumption was strictly material. Fill the stomach first, then invent the gods. But the excavation of a site in southeastern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe showed that the traditional sequence was out of order. Dating back roughly 12,000 years, this site predates the earliest known domesticated crops by thousands of years. The people who built it were entirely nomadic hunter-gatherers, yet they erected massive T-shaped limestone pillars, weighing up to 20 tons, forming complex circular enclosures, without leaving a single farming tool or permanent residence. Nearby, at an even older site called Göbekli Tepe, we find 13,000-year-old circular foundations and systematic stone sewer drains. Long before they planted wheat, humans were planning community health and civic infrastructure. Without the stable caloric surplus of a farm, the logistics of a project this size shouldn't have worked. How were they feeding the thousands of laborers required to move these stones, and what was driving them to do it? Before humans reshaped the physical landscape, they changed how they perceived their place in nature. For hundreds of thousands of years, foragers operated as a passive part of the ecosystem. But in the Levant and Upper Mesopotamia, groups began to view the world as something they could separate from and control. We see this change in the archaeological record through elaborate new burial practices. The emergence of an intense cult of ancestors involving the deliberate placement and plastering of human skulls created deep generational anchors to specific geographical spots. They also began carving aggressive predators into the limestone pillars: scorpions, foxes, and lions. It was a deliberate attempt to express the boundary between the wild outside world and the cultural space inside the enclosures. Monumental architecture was the physical result of this new mindset. Humans had decided to impose their own meaning onto the environment. But the desire to congregate created an immediate logistical bottleneck. Gathering thousands of pilgrims, artisans, and workers in one place to construct these pillars and perform rituals requires immense caloric energy. A stationary population of that size rapidly exhausted the wild game, pistachios, and wild grains in the immediate surrounding area. To maintain social cohesion among so many unfamiliar groups, they relied on communal feasting and the brewing of early beers from fermented wild crops, which only accelerated the depletion of local food. To sustain these massive spiritual gatherings without starving, humans had to actively modify their environment. They began to select and domesticate specific strains of einkorn wheat and barley, and corralled wild sheep and goats nearby. Farming was not a prerequisite for religion. Farming was invented specifically to subsidize the logistical demands of the temple. If we reverse the diagram, we see the accurate sequence. Progress starts with the temple, forces the settlement, and ultimately requires the farm. This shared ideal, rooted in identity and ancestors, drew scattered hunter-gatherers together long before they understood crop yields. Ritual served as the social gravity that pulled nomadic groups into a stationary orbit, forcing them to cooperate and innovate just to survive their own density. That initial impulse to stand around carved pillars and build early drains maps directly onto the modern layout of cities and global infrastructure. Civilization was an ideological choice, born from a contract between hunger and identity. We built the modern world because we first decided we wanted to stand together and look up at our gods.